I find it all too often that films are being rejected for their violent imagery or even gruesome depiction of death. It's definitely not a new concept. People have been attempting to censor the art form since its birth, but rarely do you ever hear of the positive aspects of violence in films. One of the first examples that comes to mind of positive violence is Katsuhiro Otomo's 1988 classic, Akira. This classic Japanese anime has been vigorously picked apart by essayists, reviewers, and other connoisseurs of the medium, but rarely have I found someone discussing the importance of the realism in Otomo's hand-drawn style, something that I believe carries the weight of the meaning in Akira, because this is a film made by Japan for Japan, about Japan. That's why the opening scene is Tokyo being wiped clean by an atomic-esque blast, an analogy for the atomic bombs dropped on Japan during World War II. Otomo is providing Japan a reminder of the importance of their history. Their strength and unity as a people is a definitive part of their culture, especially during the reconstruction of their nation after the war. But it's also providing perspective for people from Western societies, where first-hand accounts are often nowhere to be found, so they're left with exploring the event inside of a textbook, which doesn't contain the delicacy and emotion needed to cover the topic. Let's pick apart the opening sequence of the film. Before even given a location, time period, or title of any kind, the viewer sees a city, almost hinting at the perspective of the pilots who dropped these atomic weapons. Once the explosion starts, you notice there's no sound. There's obviously a tremendous amount of destruction occurring, yet you hear nothing. Otomo is capturing what a first-hand account would be like. It's frighteningly real. The city disappears into a light, as if it's evaporating, resembling the instantaneous death of those caught in the vicinity of the blast zone. Only when the blast reaches the screen and consumes the corners in white does the director present his name and title of the film, Akira. This is one of my favorite opening sequences in film because it tells a story about Japan in the matter of 30 seconds, and what a fantastically violent way to set the precedent for the film, which is immediately complemented by the rebuilt cyberpunk Tokyo set in the year 2019, providing the idea that Japan has rebuilt from another atomic disaster. But this time it's riddled with violent protests, corrupt politicians, and renegade teenage biker gangs, three stories that revolve around the arc of Tetsuo, a young biker gang member who gains psychic powers after being experimented on by the government. But what's interesting is how all of these revolving stories are affected by the violence of each other. Tetsuo doesn't become the center of the film until a little over halfway through the 2-hour runtime, and that only occurs by having these satellite plots cooperate seamlessly, stories that cannot be told without violence. And the way Otomo depicts Tetsuo's struggle is strangely delicate. There's a heavy motif of subtle historic Japanese influences embedded in his actions, which become more obvious throughout the course of the film. As Tetsuo begins his rampage through Tokyo, he heads to the construction site of an Olympic stadium, a nod to when Japan hosted the 1964 Olympics, considered by many to be a major achievement for a nation that was still under reconstruction. Tetsuo's visions parallels the PTSD of those near the violence of the atomic blast, and his historic mutation after his psychic abilities manifest into a physical form resembles the generations of genetic mutations caused by the atomic blast. Followers trail behind him, believing that fighting with him against the government could lead to a more prosperous future. It reads as a metaphor for the cultural and political shift of Japan after initializing its reconstruction. They needed to advance as an economy and society for the betterment of the nation, but conflicting ideals within their embedded culture proved to be a moral argument that would often turn violent. However, as Tetsuo is seen as an obvious embodiment of Japan's post-war struggles, you notice how violent and grotesque the imagery is, because violence is a part of Japan's struggle within the era. These stories couldn't have the same impact without the constant reminder of devastation, not just on a citywide scale, but an almost intimate level. When you see protesters kill police officers, you're taken out of the movie for a minute. It's jarring, not in the sense of losing immersion, but in regards to your emotional status. If it takes the most absurd monstrosity to allow you to say, wow, that's really fucked up, then good. Otomo is telling the story correctly. If films are supposed to draw emotions out of people, then the most sincere way to convey Japan's post-war struggles is through immense violence. and not shy away from the reality of history. If you don't represent this gruesome aspect of history correctly, you're only going to be left with that textbook. If films are truly meant to tell stories, then this is how you do it. Thanks for watching.